say, tell me where you really from. I ain't talking New York, I don't mean West Coast. I mean, look at your skin, so where you really from? I don't mean in the South.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome and thank you for tuning into Great Wall of America, Untold Stories, a limited podcast series where we as immigrants get to share our stories of how we overcome the barriers facing us in this country. Today's guest is Sean Rowe, a Korean-American entrepreneur who's built a vibrant community with his alcohol brand, Lunar Hard Seltzer. At the heart of many events and conversations, Lunar, under Sean's vision, has grown from a business to a point of pride for his peers. Continuing to tell his story one drink at a time, here is Sean Rowe. What's going on, my man?
Oh, good.
How you doing?
Thanks for having me.
Hell yeah, thank you for being here. All right, Sean, where are you from? And I mean, where you really from? You know,
I'm from DC. That's where I was born and raised. I've been in New York for about 10 years now, but where I'm really from is Seoul, South Korea. That's where my family's from. They talk about it as if they're a little bit of the OGs. They're like, we were in Seoul before Seoul is what it was today. Because obviously the city and the country has grown and developed so much, but that's where I'm really, really from.
Seoul.
Yeah.
That's what's up. And did your parents, they moved here first?
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
We came here first. I mean, I guess my dad's side of the family came first.
Right.
He kind of like scoped it out, checked it all out, and said, "Guys, it looks pretty good. Let's come on over." And soon thereafter, he got married and brought my mom over as well too. And next thing you know, the rest of the family was here.
So mom and dad met back in Korea.
Yeah.
He came scope it out.
Yeah.
Then brought the family here.
Yeah, trailblazer, that guy.
What did he do back in Korea?
Honestly, anything to pay the bills.
Right.
It was just tough. Like, we didn't really come from wealth necessarily, so. Right. I think for him, he always, had, he lived the American dream in a lot of sense, right? Of better opportunities. He was very smart, good with his hands. He was a good, engineer. And his dream was to, work on the spaceships that make it to the moon and everything. In the DC area, there's a Goddard space station, a NASA space station over there. So that's why that was one of the natural spots we ended up settling on. So that's kind of what he was doing, but honestly, anything really to pay the bills.
Wait, so Pops moved over here and started working on spaceships?
He wishes directly.
Okay.
No, he started working with cars and factories, because again, he was an engineer.
Yeah.
So he was working there, and he was working his way to get into the NASA premises and whatnot.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Wow, that's such a awesome, because you ask a little kid, it's like, oh yeah, I want to be an astronaut, and he just stayed with him.
Yeah, well that's the issue. He gives me a lot of a hard time for it, but I guess I popped out and threw a little wrench into his plans. He's like, I don't know about this. I think I should really, now that I have a family, I should think about what's best for the family. So Pops really. To put it bluntly, he did give up on his dreams for me in that sense, right? He was on the path, but I guess realistically, what he told me and what he would also say to this day is he found a better dream. But as far as the original dream that he had he had to do a little pivot.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the better dream is family.
Yeah. Family, better opportunities, not having to live through the shit that he had to do back then. Yeah. By the way. Language?
Oh yeah, we
cool.
cousin.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool.
We're
just
good.
Checking,
Yeah. It's not a clean song at all. Okay, that's great. So Pops came over here. Are you an only child?
No, I have a younger sister.
Okay,
I have a younger sister. She's gonna be a surgeon.
Wow, awesome.
Somebody in the family.
Somebody had to.
It wasn't gonna be me. It wasn't gonna be me. So shout out to Gina. That's my sister right there. Shout out
Gina.
She's got her graduation this summer, so I'm gonna be visiting the whole. It's gonna be a whole festivity. So I'm glad. Awesome. I'm happy for her.
Yeah.
I'm glad it was her. Because I sure as hell that's not for me.
Right. Were you good academically?
Sorry.
Academically, were you? How were you?
I was the kid. I guess I was book smart in the sense that I was good at test taking. So I did pretty decently, but I didn't really find a passion in academia or the subject matter as much. I think I was always interested in people.
Yeah.
And I think that's when I found when I went to college at UVA, the economics program was it was more behavioral economics. Like modeling people's behaviors and whatnot. that was like a perfect blend of like, cool, I'm good at numbers, but like I don't really care for it. But it's also using numbers to like understand, I guess like kind of like a lot of game theory stuff.
Was it like psychology almost like related?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit game theory too. You know, like the
right.
prisoner's dilemma, right? Like
Sure.
kind of using numbers and quants to be able to kind of explain a lot of that stuff. So I always, I was always very interested in that stuff and just how what makes people tick.
Yeah.
So that ended up being the perfect kind of like, oh, I think I really like this stuff. And
Yeah.
I guess that was the beginnings of like, not only do I like understanding people, but I want to build stuff that people use and like, and I guess in our case, drink. So
Right.
yeah, it was like the beginning of it all.
So like, were you always a people-facing kind of person? Like, were you shy growing up?
Yeah, I wasn't.
Right.
I think for me, I think it depended, right? Like during the summers in the family business, like when I'm the front of the house and stuff, like, cool, yeah, I'm great, whatever.
Yeah.
But like if I had my choice, I think I was definitely a lot more reserved and introverted, unless it's like people that I'm really feel close with and feel like really secure with. Because I think for me, there was definitely a lot of introspection throughout my entire life about like, what does it mean to be me? What does it mean to be Sean, right? What does it mean to be like, how much of this thing is like, how much of this is Korea? How much of this is America? Like also changes on the context.
Sure.
So I think not only, like, I think that was obviously a big part of it, but a lot of like, just a lot of introspection. So I think I just needed a lot of time to myself to think about a lot of that things, but obviously I got out, right?
Yeah.
Touch grass, as the kids say these days, know, and all that. But I think I definitely needed some level. I think I was always an ambivert. Is probably maybe a short.
What does that mean?
So it's, like introvert, extrovert.
Okay, got it.
I guess
like
there's
a little bit of both.
The middle, there's a middle category when you're kind of both, because I think
Right.
the technical definition is like, where do you draw energy from? Like true extroverts, they're like suffering if they're stuck inside,
Right.
but they get energy from like meeting people and being out there and all that good stuff. Whereas
Right.
introverts, that saps their energy, and they gain energy when they're like inside with themselves and whatnot. And I think ambiverts have a healthy balance of the two.
Got it. Okay, so
Or something like
according
that.
to that, like an introvert isn't necessarily not outgoing in public.
Right.
It's just that like, okay,
Yeah.
I see. What's up, everybody? Thank y'all for tuning into the Great Wall of America podcast. I just want to take a quick second out to give a shout out to Lunar Seltzer, the sponsor for this series. Some of the best people, some of the best drinks, and they're always showing out for the community. So make sure you show them some love at Lunar Seltzer. Back to the podcast. Yeah, I like that. I mean, okay, so like for example, for me, the turning point was like music. Prior to music, I was like very much like scared of, putting myself
The
out
world.
there. Yeah, scared of the world. I think music was like my cape. It was my first time that.
It was your superhero like outfit.
I think it's something that I found, something I could grab onto. Was there something like that for you?
Ooh.
It could be like anything, right?
Yeah.
Was there a role model? Was there like a movie character, a singer, artist?
I think.
Could be your dad.
Yeah. The thing that helped me kind of get out there, basically, right?
Kind of, yeah.
I think, honestly, it was really when I started opening an eye to sports. So growing up in the D.C. area, I was a big Washington Redskins, or I guess now we're the Washington Commanders, fan. And, I mean, literally nobody in my family gives a rat's ass about sports and whatnot, besides like, because they did small business, their customers be rocking like playoff shirts or whatever. They're like, oh, I guess the Redskins are good this year, right? Like that's kind of the extent of it, but they didn't really care.
Yeah.
But I think once I really understood that, I didn't appreciate as much back then how much of a social lubricant that can be with just, let's call it mainstream America. Right? Because then all of a sudden you're chopping it up with like not just your fellow Asian kids, but like people of all, I guess mostly stereotypical dudes of all age, especially in high school and whatnot. Yeah. Doing like fantasy sports, watching ESPN during the heydays of ESPN and all that good stuff. Yeah. That naturally had, I think, a very easing of the barriers, if you will. Yeah. So that's probably the single biggest thing, because like even to this day, I'm not able to watch as much sports as I used to, or as much as I'd love to. But like if I can, like, I could chop it up, right? I could talk sports. I could talk, NBA history. Maybe not as much as like the hardcore fans, but like, I could keep up.
Yeah, more than an average,
right?
Like, because I only watch NBA during the finals, so definitely more than me.
Right, exactly. But like, I could talk about like the storylines throughout the season and how ridiculous the Luka trade was, and this and that. Right. And like, for most sports fans who keep up, regardless of their background, they're like, it's just something that people. I don't know. It's one of the things, and we can get into this later too. Part of the reason why I love, building an alcohol brand, something like this, because I feel like it is a part of central to a lot of these cultural things, music, arts, creativity, but also sports and media, that I think just have a magical effect of just like making people like forget about our differences and think about the commonalities. So yeah, I think that's probably the single biggest thing that I think about. I didn't really think about that question before, but yeah, now that I'm thinking about it on the spot, that's probably the thing that helped me the most.
I think that I find that relatable actually, because my when I first came to the States, my white stepfather is the one that kind of was responsible for me every day, but he encouraged me to do football, wrestling, and lacrosse. Yeah, and that definitely helped me. Like
that's definitely some white people sports right there.
I mean, for sure. I mean, well, football, not really, right? Like, fair, football. Fair. But I mean, like, but like wrestling and lacrosse for sure. Yeah. But yeah, like the sports definitely. Like, if I felt weird in a classroom where I'm the only like Chinese kid, I didn't feel weird when we're in the locker room or we're just like huddled up.
Because we're a team.
We're a team.
We're a team. There's like, we win together, we lose together. Like.
I think music does that too. You mentioned that, right? Like, but like, there's something about sports, I think, that's like even more humane, because me and you are trying to whether push the same thing or like run the same distance, and we're both like, damn, like that was hard,
and I think there's a reason why we love the Olympics, right?
Right.
I think there's something incredibly human, and the fact that there's like so much at stake, and there's only one winner, and everybody's going for the same target, and everybody's working 4 years of their life for it, right?
I know. Just a whole nother thing, but like I read like there's Olympic athletes, they had to sell their gold medals just to train.
Yeah. No, it's
which is
crazy.
That's messed
up. So
up.
much respect for because I also have friends who like we're on the path, like we're like kind of they're like junior Olympians and stuff like that.
Wow. Yeah.
So I've hear secondhand, and they obviously know folks who end up being like Olympians and stuff like that. But just hearing about that lifestyle and that commitment, I appreciate a lot more these days why you tend to see, like, for example, a lot of like former athletes in like sales and like leadership roles, because I think it's just ingrained in you a lot earlier. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you were at the front of the house a couple of times. So did y'all have a family? I mean, have a restaurant growing up?
Yeah, so I mean, I always joke, like, name a stereotypical Korean American small business. We've done it.
Nails?
We haven't done nails. We haven't done nails, but we've done like deli/grocery store.
Got you, yeah.
We've done car washes. We've done laundromats. And it's like weekends or summers. Somebody got to happen, or like, hey, we got a scary looking legal letter, like, what is this? And it's like, oh no, it's fine, you're good. Like just dealing with that, right? It's like, oh, you call this person. They call something, like, I don't know what's going on, can you call? A lot of that stuff, right?
Right. And what was like the music growing up whether they played music in the restaurant or at the house? Did your parents play any music?
Yeah, so my parents didn't play that much music. But they just played whatever's like, I guess, their customer base and audience would like. Yeah. So definitely a lot of hip hop, a lot of like 90s, 2000s hip hop and R&B.
Yeah. What kind of restaurant was it?
No, it was just like a corner store deli.
Oh, deli. Okay, yeah. Cool.
So nothing too crazy, you don't pull up to a deli and it's like pop in or anything like that. But a lot of that stuff, big influence in terms of like kind of where I grew up, and obviously, like, as a lot of, I think, children of immigrants, or especially Asian American immigrant children, can relate to, like, these weren't like 5-star establishments, right? These are like whatever our families could gather and muster up. So they weren't in the best parts of town, right? a lot of African American, also folks who were struggling to make a living,
Mm-hmm.
audiences, but folks with a good heart. My aunt, who was also with the business, like, they called her Mama Sang, and that was that's just the nickname that the local folks gave her, and that's kind of like the name that stuck within the family for us too.
I love that.
So it's very, very like small town vibes and feel, like small town, like family community feeling. And ups and downs, and definitely wasn't easy, but props to them. And I still think they're crazy for doing what they did, which is like, let's literally give up everything and go on the other side of the world, like pre-internet. Like, I know nothing about this place, let's go. Right?
Ridiculous. You had to print out maps back then, print out like directions and stuff.
If it was up to date,
right.
like,
if it was up to date,
you turn, it's like, oh shit, there's no road here.
Yeah. So do you remember anything about specifics about maybe stuff that they had to kind of hide about themselves to help fit in more into America and to get that
with
dream?
their customers, like as business owners,
just like their day-to-day lives, right? Like as Korean immigrants moving here in order to be more American. What were some of the things that they made small about their themselves? If there was anything like that.
I don't know if I don't know if this qualifies as necessarily being like something small, but like, I think again, a lot of folks can relate. This is before everybody loves K barbecue and is like, crushing bottles of soju, right? This is like the 80s and 90s. They're like, hey, it's lunchtime. Obviously, we packed lunch because we ain't DoorDashing nothing,
right?
And it's all Korean food, homemade Korean food. Like, let's go eat in the back, right?
Yeah. Right.
So, I guess small, but I think somewhat meaningful and symbolic. Yeah. In a lot of ways. Sure. It's not like we're busting out meatloaf and people are like, oh, that looks like good meatloaf, right?
Right.
It's like, what is that? What is that nasty ass smell, right?
For sure.
Like, oh, it's just kimchi, which people seem to love these days, right?
Right.
So it's crazy how much times have changed in that sense. But yeah, that's common, right? And I think a lot of, even for me and a lot of, I think, again, our peers, the lunchbox moment that we love to talk about, right?
Yeah.
Kind of a similar thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. What about for you growing up in the house, was there an incentive to teach you Korean?
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool.
Oh yeah. So
that's good.
My family was always very, I guess, had a lot of pride about our heritage.
Yeah. Well, some families do, but like they're like, well, we don't want our kids to not be able to speak fluent English, so let's just teach them English.
Oh yeah, right. And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. Obviously, like this shit, coming to a new country and parenting alone is hard shit, right? I always say like the toughest job in the world, especially like mothers, right? Toughest job in the world. But to do that, across the in a different world, who knows if there's a right or wrong way to do it? But at least my family, very, very, very insistent about it. I think it was a big influence on kind of what helped define what it means to be Korean American for me too, right?
Yeah.
Because for me, very much. First of all, they're like, I think I was like 8. They're like, they sat me down. They're like, son, Sean, it's time to finally learn how to use chopsticks.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, like the right way.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting down. It was like, I think it was like 7 p.m. on a sun, because I remember the sun was setting.
Yeah.
With like the shitty like inside indoors like lamp.
Yeah.
And it's just like strike. Like no. Just
right.
I was like no. Keep practicing. Doing that for a night.
You didn't know how to use it, or you were using it the wrong way? Because he was it the right way.
Not the proper way.
Is there a proper way?
I mean, it's.
I guess.
I think the way it was, or like I guess the folks of status or whatever used to use it.
Yeah. Sure.
But of course, like I was able to use it just fine.
Yeah.
But I was doing a lot of like like when it like crosses over.
Yeah.
I was doing a lot of that, and they're like, it's not the proper way.
I guess that's how I do it too. Yeah. I see what you mean.
I mean, who's to say
some
what's
people
the right or
are
wrong
really
way?
like, they're like, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a textbook, right?
Yeah.
They're like, it's time to learn to use chopsticks the right way.
Right. What I always thought was funny was, I don't see it as much now, but when I first moved to like Brooklyn, in like 2012 when you got Chinese food and they gave you the chopsticks. The chopstick wrappers had the 3 pictures to show you how to use chopstick. And I'm like, yo, good luck with whoever's trying to learn from that, bro. You know.
You know that was for the Chris Tucker in Rush Hour.
Wow,
that's basically what it was. You know.
Yeah. Rush Hour.
So I mean, so chopstick is one. I mean, language too. Like
right.
At home, I speak mostly, if not exclusively, Korean.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I mean, it helps because like I spent elementary school in Korea, so I was born here, came there, came back.
Got it. Okay.
So during formative years, so I think that helped. It is getting to the point where my family's like, how have you not forgotten Korean? It's actually kind of disgusting. Like, you've lived here 30 plus years and like your Korean's still pretty good. Like,
that's awesome.
What's wrong with you? I'm like, y'all told me to, speak this shit,
No, that's great.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. I mean, I think like we take it for granted. I mean, like I meet so many people from, our backgrounds, and like nowadays they're like, man, I really wish I like, had the opportunity, But like you said, like there was no right or wrong, because like that was just a way to survive.
We were all just trying to figure our shit out,
Right.
But I don't know. I think my pops had some foresight, because I remember he sat me down.
Right.
I forget when, but super early.
Yeah.
I being memorable too, and he's like, basically what he told me in a long-winded way was like, listen, the reality of the world is, at least in modern day America, like, later when you're like submitting resumes or like getting a job or whatever, like all else equal, if you had the exact same resume, but your name says Sean Rowe versus John Smith, they're probably going to pick John Smith if you have nothing else of uniqueness to offer. Right. But that's why it's like, if you bring in different like languages, different skills, and something that you can, something else you can bring to the table.
Yeah.
That's what's going to help you make stand out and make you unique. Right. I don't know how that man realized that and had the foresight to kind of,
that's wild,
relay that. But I don't know. He must have seen some shit.
Yeah. You think that stuck with you? Or
100%.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I mean, it's a big, long-winded inspiration for, how we came up with the brand for Lunar too, right?
Let's talk about it.
Yeah. Because, I mean, the whole point of it was like, it's an American product, just like I'm an American human being that you can tell. Like, I stick out like a sore thumb when I go to Korea these days.
Right.
But the contents, the fruits, the ingredients that we use, they're also undeniably not American, right?
And the story too.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And just like my upbringing and parts of my makeup is not very American either.
Yeah.
So I think and it's been helpful in that sense, right? Because a lot of whenever we're talking and pitching and whatever, they're like, oh great, well first of all, thank God it's not another like lemon lime or orange or whatever raspberry hard seltzer. It's something a little bit different.
Yeah.
So that's always helped us stand out. So huge inspiration.
Was there okay, I guess I'll start with the name. Yeah, because for me, like naming songs, projects, one of the best parts. And I get to do it again and again because I get new stuff. But you only got to do it once. So what inspired the name? Because so there's obviously Lunar New Year, that stuff. So maybe it's as simple as that, but I would love to hear the process and maybe what were some of the alternative names if there was,
So I mean that to at least start with the punchline, that was what the end goal ended up being. But I'll talk about the goal or what kind of a name we wanted. The type of name we wanted was something that brought most or as many Asian Americans as possible. Like we wanted to build a brand that we could all come together on, right? There's enough that we have of differences and and obviously in history and bad blood and tiffs and stuff like that. But
like cousins almost.
You know what I mean? But I think especially here at the end of the day, we're all immigrants, right?
Right.
From Team America, as my boss would say.
Right. Everybody.
Right.
Literally.
Yeah. So I think a lot of it is we wanted a brand that was like, hey, let's build something that most people can recognize and see themselves in, and feel like, oh, I feel like that's repping me, and I could rep that, right? So, obviously, there were a couple of different themes, but one that I think was immediately stood out was the lunar calendar, right? And the fact that it's on a different schedule, and most Asians, not even just East Asians, most of Asian cultures have some sort of a lunar calendar. Obviously, Chinese New Year being the biggest and most famous one, and the biggest celebration of the year in China, for example, right? So that was a big part of it. In terms of other ideas, I can't remember any off the top of my head. We have a spreadsheet somewhere that
Okay, but there were other like names.
Oh, there were like hundreds. There were like I think at least like 250.
I'm so curious.
And it was one of those like, don't think, don't question, just write whatever comes to mind, like stream of consciousness. And then it's like, let's go through it and see what sticks out, what we vibe with.
Right.
I think I think what we were encouraged by was that Truly, which is one of the big brands at the time, it came out with an adverb, Truly. So we were like, well, if Truly can come out with a fucking adverb for a brand name, let's use an adjective, right? Because we were also like, let's do Lunar something, right? But we're like, maybe we just keep it simple, just Lunar. Yeah.
I love that because it is mad clean.
Yeah, and it's also something that you can kind of extend with later on. It's like Lunar, like Seltzer, Lunar, this, Lunar that.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and honestly, like I don't immediately think of Lunar New Year. That's the thing. Like that was the only thing that I could relate it to.
Yeah.
But I was like, there's like the word lunar is a little. There's something. It's a little more.
I mean, literally means of the moon.
Of the moon. Yeah, there's a little something more about it. You know. And so I know y'all started in 2020.
Late 2020.
Late 2020.
Yeah.
Was this something that that was like a pandemic baby that was born, and then or was there like inklings before?
Oh
already?
no, we had been working on it for a minute before that. We first had the idea. I used to remember the date. It was like February 19th or something, 2019.
Okay.
Because we were always looking for some sort of a business to start, me and my co-founder.
Yeah.
And we were meeting regularly to catch up, like, oh, what's the latest batch of like ideas that you came up with, and going through all that. And naturally, we do that over a drink, right?
Yeah.
And I think we're like, it was towards the end of the night. We're like out of ideas. Like, okay, another batch of dog shit ideas. Like, today ain't it, right?
Yeah.
And then we're just like shooting the shit about like, would you see this? Would you see that? And this was around the time when like I think Crazy Rich Asians had come out. I think right before or right around then. We were like, that's fucking dope. This is also when like I think Blackpink was about to headline Coachella as a K-pop group for the first time. That April. We're like, that's fucking dope because like the stuff that I used to like geek out to or like listen to basically by myself because nobody else understood this, right? Now it's on like arguably one of the biggest stages in the world, right?
Yeah.
So, and at this point, obviously, we're a couple beers in, right? So, like, this is fucking awesome. Like, man, what other industries could use some like Asian invasion, a little Asian influence?
Yeah.
And I guess it was like last call, and we're about to order the last drink, and I guess we both looked at the beer menu, and I guess right time, right place, right BAC level in the blood. I guess the light bulb just went off. Or like. This, I mean, like, there's 4 ales, 3 lagers, 2
ABAs, all that.
It's all the same, right? They all look the same, right? In a lot of ways. So we're like, yo, maybe this is the place that could use a little bit of some color. And I guess the rest is history. Right? That from there is like a bunch of research of like how do you make, how do you make beer? How do you make hard seltzer? Because I tried Truly. I don't think a lot of people know this. Truly's used to be in bottles.
Ah, okay.
Because they're made by the Sam Adams, the Boston Beer Company.
Oh, okay.
So that presumably, because obviously they do a lot of bottles there, that must be why, or I don't know why they started, but they were in bottles, and I tried it the summer before because I had a friend who was doing the keto diet, and he's like, "This is the only thing I could drink."
Oh shit,
Chris, this shit is nasty. I can't believe you're drinking this. But we're like, I tried this before, and like, I could see why this might pick up as a health and wellness trend, because that's been obviously going on in all food space. I was like, I wouldn't be surprised if this kind of hits the alcohol space too. And again, like 4 or 5 months later was what I like to call the Great White Claw shortage of 2019, right?
Oh shit!
If you remember that summer when there was like,
I was in China, but wait, what happened?
So I mean, it was like in the news, everyone's like, this White Claw thing, that the kids are drinking these days, it's out everywhere, can't get enough of them.
Oh shit! Okay.
So there's like a really, really big, that was like the beginning of what I'd say the seltzer boom in that sense. So I was like, shit, already one step too late, but it's okay, we'll catch up. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Wow. Okay. And I know your parents got your sister becoming the surgeon already, so you're off the hook sorta. But how do they feel about you getting into this field?
Yeah, I mean, at first they didn't know because I didn't tell them.
Okay.
Right? I was like, why deal with the nagging and the 1,000 questions?
Yeah.
Or the game of 31
Let me
questions.
get something to show them first.
Right,
Okay,
exactly.
okay.
I was like, where I think I might have told him, like, yeah, I'm doing this little fun, like, side project. You
Sure.
know? Like,
Yeah.
because I still have my day job in tech and everything.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until like I had already gone full time.
Yeah.
We've already like fully gone into it and gained some traction. And I was like, hey, mom, dad, I gotta tell you, like, I left my day job for this thing, right? Because I've already been filling them in. I'm like, hey, we got like H Mart, we got like whole, you know what I mean? So like.
Right.
It's not
They're
like,
oh, this side project is going pretty good. Yeah.
And they haven't said this, but what I sense is we had won a pitch competition hosted by Brewbound, which is like the biggest beer trade publication.
Okay.
And they didn't say this, but I feel like when I told them we won first place, I think there was like a little change. It's like, oh, you won an award?
Yeah.
You know, like Asian parents love it awards in first place. They're like, oh, maybe there's something here, right?
I love that.
So eventually I told them, and I think they probably knew. They also didn't say it. They probably knew that I was going to give it a shot one way or another. And I also explained it. It's like, yeah, like, listen, we have a plan. Like, I'm also not trying to be reckless with this either. Like,
right.
But it's, I think there's something exciting, and I think there's a potential there, and give me, trust me on this, right? And luckily they weren't. I mean, if they were, they didn't show me. Let's call it, right?
Yeah.
If there were any concerns or anything like that, they didn't really, express it to me on the spot. But no, they've been really supportive ever since, right?
Awesome.
Especially these days too. Very supportive. They're like that, like, oh, we know you're busy, you don't have to call, which like very smart of them. Guilt trips
makes
me.
You want to call.
Yeah. Guilt trips me into calling even more.
Very good.
Yeah, they're so good at that. But no, I mean they're very supportive, and they're asking like how everything's going. They're like, hey, how's the velocities at H Mart going, right? So they're very supportive.
With the terms.
Yeah, getting like technical terms out there. So no, they've been good sports about it.
Cool. And does Pops or Mom, do they drink? Does either of them drink?
Yeah. I mean, my dad drinks.
Cool. So you got Lunar at the crib.
I do. But he's like, no, this too weak for me. I need.
You need the real thing.
Yeah. Give me the red cap. OG soju. Right. Yeah. He's like, that's my speed.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
I think you briefly mentioned this, but like I feel like, but the alcohol business, kind of like in the music business in a way, like you said. It helps connects people, And can you speak to some of the experience that you've had in helping connecting people, through Lunar?
I mean, I think the easiest thing is also obviously like just while people are drinking, right? It's, I mean, it happens, yes, and I'm guilty of this too, but not as many people drink alone. It's more of a social thing, right? So I think naturally with some sort of celebration or a lot of the events that we're sponsoring or being a part of, and it's also social lubricant too, right? It kind of brings down a lot of kind of like the walls and barriers that we typically might have if we're sober. Makes it a little bit easier. And that's why my theory is that it's probably why like corporate happy hours, I'm sure, must have started. To be like, let's not be so stiff. Let's be ourselves a little bit, right?
Right.
Which obviously sometimes goes bad, but it's a story for another day. So I think naturally at events, it's like, oh, Sean is like, Bohan, have you met Daisy? Daisy, you should meet Bohan. Like things like that naturally, I think just happens in the spur of the moment. Right. And I think that serendipity, there's something beautiful there.
Okay.
When you're just kind of like a drink or two in, just a little bit loosened up and just having a little good time. So that helps, but also just like, I didn't realize this when I joined, when I started this, but I realized that my job is actually half more like kind of hospitality service and half product, right? Even though I make a product, because so much of this industry is like relationship based, right? You could have like so much of like hey, you show up to my place 5 times in the past 3 months to try and pitch your product. I respect that. You know what? Let's give you a try, right? As opposed to like, because like the big companies, they don't send nobody, right? Because they're like, Budweiser's like, we don't need to send anybody to sell shit because like, people knows Budweiser, right? So I think that human component is really, really, I guess, a difference maker.
Hell yeah,
in a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So I think from that standpoint, it brings people together because in your favor to develop a relationship, like get on first name basis. Like I just came from, right before this, the Whole Foods right next door, right? Because those are my guys. Like giving Shaq and Brando like a shout out and be like, "We doing good?"
Hell
like
yeah.
it's like a quick 30-second, like I'm just showing up. I think somebody called it like a courtesy call, like
Hell
an
yeah.
in-person courtesy call.
Sure,
Like,
yeah.
just making sure you're doing good.
Yeah.
Very much it, right? That means a lot because they're like, nobody else visits me.
Yeah. Yeah. Hell yeah.
So from that standpoint, I think it helps a lot, right?
Yeah.
And eventually, I'm trying to think of a specific example where it's like that evolved into something else. Actually, I mean, the closest example, actually, I should say, is like, shout out to the guys at Sour Mouse, right? Which obviously you're no stranger to, like, Tom and Aaron and those guys. When they first opened Sour Mouse, we were one of the, first, I think, partners there, and they've been carrying us for a long time and big supporters. And, when it was time to open up Sugar Mouse, which is like the second location.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know that. That's cool.
Yeah, it's actually right
awesome.
right in the East Village, so not too far actually. They're like, hey, let's get you in here, right?
Yeah.
So I think just organic kind
That's
of like
awesome.
extending and building on that relationship helps a lot.
Yeah. Hell
Yeah. So I think that's a big part because it's like now all of a sudden, the other person has their other relationship to underwrite on that on you, right? Because it's like, cool, I don't know the Sean guy if he just walked into my door, but because Bohan introduced me, cool, I'm gonna fuck with him, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's a little bit of that.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to the Sour Mouse guys for sure. They let us go in there and throw a couple of community open mics. They were very, straight up about that.
Yeah.
I think for me, one of the examples that I can think of is, I think this is the first time that we got to work together, which was I did a show at Bobble House, and then y'all had helped supply some of the drinks. Yeah.
Shout out to Abby and Ophelia.
Hell yeah. But yeah, I remember waiting in line and like there's people in front of me and they were non-Asian, and they were like, "Oh, Lunar, what is it?" And then they were being taught about it, and they're like, "Oh, it's Chinese, it's Asian. Oh, okay, cool." And like to me, that was like a breakthrough moment in my head. I'm like, oh, for example, a lot of people, their points of contact with Asian culture is very limited. Chinese food or a movie.
Yeah.
And then like they're not gonna walk up to a random Asian person and start talking to them, But like at the moment I realized, oh, like this is like a point of contact, for someone that might not have.
It's the gateway.
It's the gateway, and it also happens to be another gateway, which is alcohol,
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, it's crazy, man. Because like to your point, before like what did we have? We had Jackie Chan.
Yeah.
Right. We had Bruce Lee.
Yeah.
And then we had those are probably the biggest ones that we could point to.
Yeah. Everything else is like almost like a meme.
Right. It was like a meme. It was like the short end. It was like the laugh.
The
like
joke.
Exactly. It was the punchline of the joke and
Right.
things like that.
Right.
I guess we had Harold and Kumar.
Yeah.
Right. But
Okay.
again,
So,
it's like so limited.
Harold and Kumar. This is okay. So one thing is, for people listening, Sean came from a pitch. He came from, showing up to a venue and cold pitching the people. I think that's so. I think we have to applaud that.
No, I just walked in. That's all I did.
Well, but still, like you said, it's about showing up, right?
Yeah.
You could hire like an intern and be like, "Yo, go talk to these people."
Yeah.
But like you said, that face to face really matters. I just sent out over 300 emails to college directories of college radios, and my friends like, why didn't you use like a MailChimp or something, but like every one of them, they had, some of them wanted MP3, some of them wanted Wave, some of them wanted like a press kit, so it made sense to do each of them individually, and I felt great doing it, like regardless if any of them hits me back, to be honest,
No, it's something that's tough. Like it took me a while to get to be like, to actually internalize, no, like this is not the easiest way, but like this is the right way, right? Because like we have so many tools and options available, especially in this modern day and age where our pocket or our smartphones are smarter than the computer that sent man to the moon, right? But I think
crazy.
I mean, this is where I'm gonna get maybe a little bit too off the rails, so stop me if I am, but like,
no, please.
I think that's the part, like these are the times when I think, to quote Kevin Durant, the hardest path is even more respected and valued, right? Because they're like, oh, Because like think about like a handwritten card.
Mm.
You're not doing it because it's like the best version or if you have a good handwriting.
Right.
They appreciate it because like, oh, this person has a busy life. They spent 90 seconds thinking about me, putting together a letter, putting it in the mail and send it to me, right?
It's effortful.
That's the important part. It's like they
Right.
took the time for you.
Yeah.
As opposed to if you got like the standard, like, you know, especially from like salespeople, like wishing you a happy holidays, like a printed card, whatever. Like, I mean, which is great. Yes, like you did something. I get it.
Sure.
But I think that time and value, because I think that's the one resource we can't do anything with, right? Time.
Yeah. And I think that's how we, you know, even growing up, like, you know, our parents, you know, paying attention to us or not, you know, like, I think that's how you show someone that you value them, is dedicating your time, you know. And I'm sure that pays off boatloads when, you know, when you leave an impression, when you go and pitch to these people.
So like, especially in this day and age of AI this and AI that,
Right.
I feel like the human aspect is valued more than ever, in my opinion.
I agree, for sure. Yeah.
And again, I think, you know, especially, maybe it's different in different industries and categories, but again, for us, like, because that brand to retailer relationship is so important.
Yeah.
Because again, that alone can sometimes carry through. Like, there are like small craft brands that have been, small craft brands for like 10, 15 years and kind of just doing like a cool, you know, thing, but nothing too big. So much industry respect, right? Because they're like, oh, I know, like that guy, Tom, or whatever, he's, you know, he's legit. He's been doing some good stuff for like 15, 20 years, and he was doing that before that. And like, people respect that, right?
Yeah.
I think that's also a good way to gauge who's your community, right? If people don't respect that, maybe you don't, maybe that hurts. Maybe it's relevant to you, maybe it's not, but I think it's something to think about.
Right, for sure. It's a feedback of some sort. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, this is a question. Oh, Harold and Kumar thing. I was thinking about something. You know, this is like a little unrelated, but it's actually very related. You know, and the hook of the song is like, you know, this idea of, so Great Wall stands for like, you know, the barriers that face immigrants, right? And then this idea that no matter what, you're a passport holder, you're still going to be treated like an immigrant. You know, you could be here for 5 generations. How do we get past this wall? So the last line is, come here, you know, pretty white bitch, you know, you might only hope, come here, let me marry you. Maybe the only way to be looked at as American is starting to whiteifying ourselves in a way. You know, and Harold and Kumar, up until that point in my time as a kid growing up, a Chinese boy growing up in the States, Harold was the closest thing that looks like to me that had on screen a hot girlfriend that wasn't Asian, you know? And I remember talking to a friend about this, and he was like he had a very extreme look. He goes, yo, until you see a Chinese guy or Asian guy fuck like a white chick on a Hollywood blockbuster, we haven't made it yet. You know, I was like, yo, you're wilding, you know? But like in a really vulgarly symbolic way, I see what he was trying to say, you know?
Yeah, because like I think it's one of those, like, people don't think it's possible until it's been done.
Yeah.
Or no one thinks it's possible until it is done.
Right, and it's not to say like white women are like the prize of women.
No, I mean,
you know, what I mean, it's more
course.
about like the, you know, because I've mentioned that in the past. People are like, oh, like what, like white, everyone wanted the white women, you know, but it's more about like how they, you know, can imagine what like an Asian male can be, you know. And you know, this is something that you said earlier. You know, you're like, oh, all my life I've been pretty introspective on thinking about, you know, who I am. You know, who is Sean, right? Like, and that's you know, I think for me that's been pretty much I can relate to that. But I was talking to someone else, you know, who was born and raised in America as a Chinese person. They're like, oh, I never think about it. You know, so I'm, you know, like I don't like to think about that, you know, and I respect that too, right? You know, like, but what was there moments where you were like, man, I'm super proud to be like who I am as an immigrant, as a Korean, and was there moments where you're like, man, things would be life would be easier if I wasn't, you know, like.
Yeah.
Like, I'll share an example for me, right? Like, I don't think there was ever any moments in my life where I'm like, I wish I was white, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like in high school parties or middle school parties, when I stepped in and like, okay, like all the girls, even the Asian girls, like the white kids, you know, like.
Yeah.
So there are maybe moments in like, damn, like man, if I was white, maybe I get some pussy or something, you know, like. But like it was so much of my insecurity speaking, really, you know. Yeah. What about you? You know.
I think for me, maybe the closest thing is so one of my best friends from grad school. He's like a proper white guy, but he said to me one day, I don't think he realized the gravity of what he said, at least what it means to me. But he said to me once, it's like, Sean, you're sometimes the whitest guy I know, but sometimes you are like the most Korean Asian dude I know. Right.
Right.
And I think to me that was a point of pride. Right.
Yeah.
That in the right situations or, you know, the right circumstances or what have you, that I could, like, I guess in some sense a chameleon, that I could be what
Code
I needed to
switching.
be or
Right.
what I wanted to be. Because to me, I know code switching as a concept, obviously, you know, there's a lot of conversation and dialogue rightfully that we should be continuing to have. And I guess I haven't really had a chance to really think about what my take is on it. But I guess the only way I've really thought about it is, like, just even within Asian culture or Korean culture, you are a certain way in the presence of adults versus with, like, your peers and friends, right? Your language, like the types of language that we use and the body language is very different. So to me, I don't know, I guess in simple, you know, child Sean's mind, I was like, oh, I guess this is no different, right? When I'm with my American friends, I speak the vernacular and the English and what have you. But I go home and it's like, cool, it's like with different people. And I get to be different peoples, right? So I think that's probably the thing that I'm like, okay, cool. I'm like on the right path, right? So in that sense, I think that was really good.
Right.
In terms of, I don't think I've ever wished I wasn't Asian.
Right.
The closest that I could think about is like, I obviously think a lot about, like, you know, like, would this situation be different if I were white? Right. Or like, how would it be different? Right. Or not even just white, like if I were just not Asian. Right.
For example, like in Lunar, have you came across situations like that in business or entrepreneurship?
Nothing that I can say for sure.
Right. Because there's nothing to reference. It's like you can't be like, let me try walking in as a white guy and see how that worked out. Yeah.
And especially with this brand, like if it was me as an individual, like if I'm at the, I don't know, like the DMV and someone's like being a jerk or whatever, like,
sure.
You know, maybe that's a different story. But like as a brand, I try not to think too much of it.
Yep.
Because I don't think it does the brand a service.
Yep. It's supposed to be more inclusive.
Right.
Right.
And also, like, I do believe in giving, you know, the benefit of the doubt. It's like, oh, maybe this person's having a shitty day.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a death in the family. Maybe there's, I don't know, maybe they didn't have the coffee yet. Right.
Yeah, we do the work for them.
Yeah. And it's like, cool. Cause you know, I do believe that, like, at the end of the day, don't they call, like, anger like poison or, you know, toxic or something, especially if you bottle it in. It's like, I just no room for a lot of that stuff, right? And just trying to be the bigger person in a lot of situations,
right?
Yeah, and just you know, to me, in situations like that, if I ever come across those, it's very much like, I'm gonna show you in 10 years.
Right. Like, it's more like,
yeah, like revenge is the best medicine or type of thing.
Yeah.
Because again, like I just don't want haters to try and bog me down.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Because I mean, there's enough haters in there. Like, shit, I'm my own hater, right?
Yeah.
I don't need to add another one.
Yeah.
So let's just try and think about it, and kill him with kindness, right?
What about the opposite side of it? What about, like, the opposite idea in the sense that, okay, you know, obviously beverage business, there's like so much competition. You know, hard seltzer business. Has it been advantageous to you that you're running like an Asian brand?
Oh, 100%.
Right. Okay.
Because I mean, and I think I mentioned this before.
I think that's definitely a change now versus, say, like if you were trying to do something Asian brand, like, say, in like 20 years ago.
Yes,
right?
I think it is a big testament to how much we've progressed and the fact that this is being welcomed, like being different is welcomed. I think a lot of, you know, the Jackie Chans and the Jeremy Lins and, you know, the David Changs, minus obviously, you know, the latest and whatnot, but at least his OG kind of the way he paved, like all those folks have walked so that, you know, we can they crawled so that we can walk.
That's a fact.
I
Shout out to Jin and Dumbfounded.
Yeah,
Yes.
yes, exactly. Folks like Dim as well, as well too.
Yeah.
Far East movement folks, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Especially as long as we're sticking in the music world. So
You know, the Far East guys, to me, one of the most impressive things, and I think, you know, I am envious of artists who are able to do this in a way, although I don't wish to change anything about it, which is that I had no idea they were Asian. You know, like, that's so cool. Like, to have a breakthrough hit and then find out, oh, they're Asian?
Yeah.
That's cool. You know?
I think that's always been the key if I'm connecting the dots, right?
Right.
Yes, Jalen and Insanity is great. It's special, is incredible.
Right.
But it was special and incredible because, I mean, he was putting Prime D Will on skates, right?
For sure. Yeah.
He was blowing past like Prime Kobe, you
Right.
know, and whatnot. And Kobe being like, who's this Jalen kid, right?
Right.
Because he was good.
Yeah.
You know, I think
the product has to outshine the mission for the
and
work.
I get it, and I sometimes fall into this trap too. It's
Same.
like, man, we're
Same.
like, but we're just so different. Like, why don't they give us a shot? Because we're different. But it's like, there's so many things that are different.
Right.
We got to be fucking good first, right?
100%. Yeah.
And it's tough. It's tough.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think that is the correct attitude. Although it takes longer, but I think that's the correct attitude.
Yeah, I mean, I try to go by the school of thought of like, be so good they can't ignore you.
Right.
I know that's a book title, and I think the contents is meant to be.
He got that from somewhere else too,
right?
You know, whatever.
But
you
but
know.
I do really believe that, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
I
be
do
so
too.
good that they can't ignore you.
Yeah, I think for me, you know, I started rapping and writing so young, and the natural thing was for me to imitate people that I thought was good, and then like I was trying to impress people that way. But yeah, it took me a long time to kind of realize, oh, I could throw some Chinese into my stuff. And you know, then I started getting some attention. But then I started like really exoticizing myself because I'm like, I never got attention before. Now this feels great, you know? And now like it really like took me, I would say it took me on a detour, you know, where I was like, the mission, you should listen to me because I'm, you know, blah, 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 I'm different. But like the product wasn't good enough, you know, like, and it took me, I think like the first time that I heard like an artist talk about it in a way that clicked for me was Kendrick had a song a couple albums ago. He said, my last LP, I tried to uplift the black artists, but there's a difference between black artists and whack artists. You know, it's like, you can't just be out here supporting anything, you know?
True.
And I love that,
It's
you know?
true.
Because, you know, in the past, I didn't, you know, I wish I had this in mind when I was been asked questions in the past about how I feel about the lack of representation in like Asian hip hop, you know, Asian American hip hop. Like I wish I don't even remember what my answer was. But like now it's like, well, who's good enough to win a Grammy?
Right.
Then let's talk about it. You know, if we got somebody that's, you know, Asian and like killing it and like he's not getting his applause, okay, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
But you know, like I don't think we're there yet. You know, I don't think we
that's
have
a tough
that
thing.
one.
Like how do we get there? Right? It's like it's never been done.
Yeah, I think part of the reason why I moved back to the States is to you know, I'm like, somebody's gonna be the first Asian rapper to win a Grammy one day.
Only a matter of time.
Yeah, let me just, you know, come back and
let me introduce myself.
let me just come play this game. You know, it's such a dumb standard, right? Because you know, Grammys simultaneously means nothing. You know, technically, you know, but it's also, you know.
It is the prestigious.
It's a standard, right? It's a standard of some sort. One thing I wanted to ask you, this is, you know, I didn't have a notebook and I thought I lost this thought, but I'm glad it came back. You know, the idea of like a leap of faith, the idea of you going from something that was secure, predictable, stable, to, you know, even if you had enough money saved up in the bank to give you a runway, to jump into something that's like unpredictable, right? Like, and I think the reason I think this is important because there are a lot of Asian kids who are under the, you know, the traditional pressures. But, you know, they kind of like are sensing like, oh, I think if I do try to do my own thing, my parents will support me. But like, they don't have that same courage to jump through that thing. You know, talk about how was that scary? How was that whole experience, you know?
Yeah, I think for me, it wasn't as scary because I had given myself, I guess, a plan. which is, first of all, like I had established myself in an industry or career where it's like, okay, if this shit goes south, at least I can come back and get a job. Right. And like a stable, well-paying job, which is like an incredibly privileged place to be able to say that.
But you worked to get that.
Right. Exactly.
So,
exactly.
yeah,
But still, like not everyone, don't even have the opportunities to be able to get to that point. Right. So, so I think that was step one. I think that was helpful. And I think also just trying to, like, I promised myself I like check in basically like every 6 months, every year to be like, does this still feel right? Do we think this is working? Are we on the right track? So I think that's always been a very helpful barometer as well too. Because at the end of the day, like one of the big parts of why I jumped into entrepreneurship is like I wanted to find out if I could do it. Right. I feel like you hear athletes talk about kind of this line of thought as well too, which is not too different. But because I was like, I think I can create an Asian brand because like I understand the culture and I live in it, but I could chop it up and like understand how to build like a brand, just like a proper Western brand in general.
Right.
Like I get the things that make people tick. But it's like I don't want to wonder, I want to find out. Right. Or worse, I didn't want to be like, on my deathbed or like, playing with my grandkids and thinking like, man, I wonder if I would have been able to do it. Like I didn't want that type of like thought or regret. So I was like, okay, if there's ever a time in my life to do it, it's like now when I have like the least amount of obligations, like I'm not married, I don't have kids or anything like that. Or even like Asian parents, right? That's also, a reality as well too. Cause Team Asia, again, as my boss would say, like we are the retirement plan, right? For a lot of families and the expectation. So let's get this out of the way now. So that was that too. And I think also, I mean, I always knew it was going to be a leap of faith, but I think that leap of faiths build character. Because like for me, going to grad school was a leap of faith, right? Because I was like, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. I got to figure some stuff out. I ain't going to be a lawyer or doctor like my mom, like my parents want me to. I got to figure something out.
Right.
I took a leap of faith to go to grad school to go into like product and tech and all that good stuff. And, it worked out. And I think it was one of the most important years of my life in terms of like building, who I am today. And I think it builds character in the sense that it adds to your story, right? Like if your life is a book, at this point I'm like chapter probably, I don't know, chapter 3 out of 10, if there's a 10 chapter book, if I live to 100.
Sure.
And I think it just builds a lot of stuff, right? And like,
But see, like everything you're saying comes from such a like abundance perspective. You're like,
it's true.
You know what I mean? Like,
I
like at some point in your life, like whether it's I don't know what it is, right? Like it gave you this, because a lot of people might get to that point where I'm like, oh man, if I don't do it now, it's now or never. But then they don't do it, like, and they might even have more security than you, like. Do you feel like? Maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but do you feel like watching your parents take that leap of faith for y'all had any like in the back of your mind, you're like, man, like that, that gave you the confidence, the abundance mindset, like
for sure. And I think I would also go as far as to say, for me, I was like, what can I do? I guess there was a very calculated risk in the sense that I was like, I ain't going to be a doctor or lawyer. I wasn't like a finance person, so it wasn't like I was going to go to Wall Street. Like how can I help contribute and give back to my parents? Actually, that was the most motivation. Like how can I give back to my parents, right? They've gone through so much shit. Literally, my dad, gave up his dreams for me. Like how can I give it back to them, right? And I was like, well, the only other thing I could think about is entrepreneurship. And again, I was in tech, so I naturally thought of like a lot of tech startup ideas and whatnot. And I was like, okay, maybe let's give it a shot, right? If it doesn't, that's fine. I could say I really gave it my all. No regrets, put it all on the table. But let me give it a shot, right? But I mean, it's the hard, again, I keep quoting Kevin Durant, it's the hardest path. It is a leap of faith, right? But I don't know. I do think it makes, like, actually another way to think about it, because I always say my dream is to be a stay-at-home dad. because I didn't get to spend as much time with my dad. So I think maybe that's my issues coming out in that sense. But
no, that's real. That's real. Thanks for saying that. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think a big part of that was like, well, how could I do that, right? Like if real life happens, I mean, everybody knows, like, you got to pay the bills, you got insurance, this and this and that. And so how do I create generational wealth too, right? So I was like, okay, maybe this is my one at bat, and I'm swinging for the fences, right? I'm swinging for the home run. If it's a triple, double, single, so be it. But let me at least swing.
Yeah.
Right? Let me swing for it. And I guess maybe getting to, I think where, you know, maybe the question is coming from is like, how can more people, not should they or, you know, will they take the leap of faith? But another way to think about it is, I don't know, it makes for a hell of a story, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Your daddy, you know, when he was not balding and, you know, full of no gray hair, like he was silly enough to be like, I can take on the world, and he gave it a try, and didn't work, but it's okay.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
And I think I think of it as like, I think it'd be a healthy like lesson that I'd love to pass on to my kids too. You know what I mean? Because you also meet I meet a lot of like, I guess to be not PC, but like old money, like white people.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, great people, obviously, just like meeting in the business community and everything.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, you know, like, and they're like really good people. Like, they're hardworking. I respect them a lot. And but a couple of trends, or one of the trends that I noticed is like, oh yeah, you know, like my parents were entrepreneurs.
Right.
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 I was like, oh. And it's like, I'm starting to see it a little bit now that I've been doing this for a couple of years, because I always describe whenever I'm like giving talks and stuff, it's like, you know, being an entrepreneur isn't a job. It's a lifestyle. Right? Because like you don't clock in, clock out. You're always on the clock, right?
Yeah.
Take a little break here and there, but you're always on the clock.
Right.
So like it's on you to balance the work life. It's on you to like say no and prioritize, but you're always on.
Yeah.
And I think there is something to be maybe like learned and picked up on. And then, you know, I should also say I saw that, right? You know, see my parents working 6 days a week, right? And then the 7th day, obviously, for the Lord. You know, but seeing that, working 12-hour days, including like opening transit and you know, commuting and everything, like, I'm sure that's had a big influence.
Yeah. You were inspired by the same story that you want to pass on.
Yeah. And you know,
it's funny. It's awesome to hear it.
Yeah. And I think ultimately, I do think it's about just being in control of your own destiny.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe tying this all together, if this is tieable.
Yeah.
Is I think to be in control of your own destiny, there are leaps of faith you have to make.
Right.
Right. Because otherwise, like, the world doesn't hand you shit.
Right.
You got to go get it. Well, I guess sometimes you get lucky and the world hands you something, but more.
But I think you pay the price for that, though.
Yeah.
You know, I think you do pay the price down the road for handed something that you didn't earn.
Yeah.
You know, especially if you think that you earned it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
No, that's great. I mean, yeah, it's not. I don't think it's about like pushing people to take that leap of faith, but it's like you said, taking control of. You know, I mean, like I feel less bad saying this because now you're not in a 9-to-5 job. You know, you're in the same lane as me, like a full-time situation. You know, I tell people the same thing. You know, people are like, you know, they're like, man, like, you get to travel all the time. You'd work whenever you want. I'm like, listen, like, the minute I open my eyes to 2 hours after I close my eyes, I'm like thinking about what the move is. You know, like, it's not that glamorous. You know, but I love it because everything I'm doing for. I know exactly why.
It's purposeful.
It's purposeful.
Yeah. I think recently I described this. I think I was like giving a talk or whatever. It's like being a founder, like an artist, or an athlete, and a lot of these similarities and common threads. I kind of call it like, it's kind of like living in New York. It's not for everybody, but everybody should try it once. Right, because I tell everybody, like, you should live in a major city at least for 2 years. Yeah. Like 1 year, it's just like, you know, you just go through the season once. It's like kind of like, you know, your head spinning. Yeah. You should do 2 years so you actually get a good sense of it. Yeah. And it's like, look, it's not for everybody. People are like, you know, they love, you know, they're used to the small town vibes and everything, and that's totally fine, right? Yeah. But I think it's helpful in terms of like putting yourself out there, like forcing yourself to like ask yourself questions about like where do you want to spend your time, what relationships you value,
Right.
what interests you, and all that stuff. And I think being a founder or like pursuing your own dreams in that sense broadly, I think a lot of commonalities in that sense, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, everybody loves the idea of it. And I'm a big believer that like that is the, if not one of the few things that I think can help bring a fulfilling life.
Yeah.
But you need a lot of things to line up or just be like extra fucking gritty to like grind through it like Jimmy Butler style, right? The man was like homeless for like...
You do like sports.
Yeah, I do.
These references. Yeah. I love that, yeah.
So, you know,
Sure.
that's kind of another way I think about it too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, going back to the leap of faith, like you don't have to make a ginormous leap.
Right.
You can make a small step of faith.
Yeah.
Right? And
well, like you said, you didn't just like cold quit turkey.
Yeah.
Quit cold turkey.
Yeah.
Right.
Like you don't have to do a head first dive into the void.
Right.
You can try with the step, right?
And maybe that's why it's intimidating for most people because they think they have to do the giant step.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think it's also like, I think it's completely natural. It's like, oh, but like, where am I going? Right.
Yeah. Right.
I'm really bad at that too because I'm always like, I got to know what direction we're going. So I'm always very envious of people who are like, yo, fuck that. Just think about like right now and the right next step, right? Which is, I think, the healthy mindset. But yeah, sometimes just like take one small step. Like I tell people like, look, if you're curious, like open up an Etsy shop. Yeah. Right. If you're like a craftsy type of person, like
sell some T-shirts. Make a T-shirt brand.
No, really, because like you get a feel for like what the cycle is. You know, like customer complaints you got to deal with, and like you get a feel for it, and you know maybe you realize you thrive off of it, right? How do you know if you never try?
Right. I think it's like you said, like, you know, you might like New York if you try it, right? And I think it's one of those things where like, okay, everyone in this world, they expect, okay, we're gonna do college ones, okay, we expect we're gonna marry, you know, do all the same. I think we should all expect to fail really bad one time. Like we should almost look for, you know, that. You know, I think ultimately you get more out of that failing than anything, you know.
Well, because like failing means you tried.
Right, exactly.
Right? You can't fail if you haven't tried anything.
Right, yeah. But I do think, you know, for us, like, growing up in a school system where if you fail, it's the worst thing, you know? I think that, like,
trains... getting a B?
Right, yeah. Anything, right? Like, anything that's considered failing in, like, whatever our context is, it's the worst thing. And, like, that does not encourage taking that leap of faith, you know?
Yeah,
like,
it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard because it's also, like... Yeah, school's another example, right? I mean, so what if you flunk a class? I mean, this is not to say...
but if you're like a
This
kid,
is not to encourage the younger listeners to be like, you know, Sean said you can flunk a class.
Yeah,
that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, it's all
fuck
part of the
school, kids.
Yeah. Just clip that right there. It's short. I think it's the bigger picture. Yeah. Right? It's like, how do you... Actually, probably, maybe where you're getting at, put another way, is like, I think how you respond to that failure probably means a lot. Right,
for sure. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, granted, if you have that expectation, like it's a school thing, like, oh, I am going to fail eventually. You know, like for this ones, like you know, for example, people from Singapore, they expect to join the army. You know, if you're expecting it, you know, it's almost it could like, you know, it could help you deal with how you respond to it. Yeah, you know.
And I guess this is the American side of me speaking, but like, and not to get too meta, but like, what does that even mean? What does it mean to fail, right?
Right. Yeah, I think for us now, we can think like that, but for like a 14-year-old kid in school,
of course,
like that's the world. Yeah. You know, like, fuck. If I get,
oh my gosh, I asked the girl out to prom and she said no.
Right.
I failed.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. You know, like, and again, I think, you know, some of us were lucky enough that there were somehow moments in our life we were blessed with some sort of ability to deal with that. Adversity, you know.
That's true. I mean, every superhero story, there's an origin story, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's Uncle Ben or, you know, the Waynes or what have you. Like,
right. I mean, I point to my, like to my point of confidence was definitely, you know, joining gospel choir and rapping on stage with my whole choir behind me. You know, like that felt like
JC.
Yeah, exactly. That felt like the moment I was born. You know, like
born again.
Born again, Phoenix. Yes, sir. I used to go by Finale with a PH.
Oh,
because it was very simple. It was like, oh, they saved the best for last.
Yeah.
But I can't spell it with an F.
Yeah.
You know, all right, let me spell it with a
it's too on the nose.
Yeah. Somehow it became even more on the nose with the PH, you know. We're almost wrapping up, but I think one thing that, you know, we've been talking about is, you know, this idea of success, and we're all sharing, like, you know, I think we see a lot of success stories. And what was, like, you know, some points where, if there was any points where you're like, man, we might go out of business now, or like we might not make it, and like what carried you through that, you know?
I mean, if I'm being real, like, I could classify a moment like that, I mean, all the time. Right. Things that in the moment feel like it's the end of the world. It happens all the time, right? And then to your point, it's like adversity. I guess what carries me through is like, job's not finished, right? Like a little bit of like, you know, I refuse to go down like this, right? I want to go out on a high note. A little bit of like, I talked up too much a big game to my fiance to go out, you know, like this. I gotta show her that I was right. You know, a lot of like, I think it's also a gut feeling too. Yeah, it's because like, well, sometimes your gut betrays you too, right? Because sometimes I'd be like, man, I'm really not feeling it. But then my fiance would be like, hey, shut the fuck up. You gotta get your shit together, right? So I think it's tough, but what gets me through it ultimately is like, I guess I'm just big on just finishing the job. I don't even know what that means,
right?
But I think I have a gut feel for like what, you know, finishing the job. And like even right now, I feel like we're, you know, for Lunar, we're like, to use a baseball or I guess reference, like it feels like the top of the third, right? We're not even halfway through, right? It's still so early stage in the grand scheme of things. So I'm like, cool, like, and it's also like I remind myself, like, bro, you signed up for this, you know. And also, you know, shout out to a lot of female founders and female entrepreneurs, like, because I have a lot of them that, you know, that I respect and I work with, and a lot of them have given, you know, birth to children. And I'm like, man, I should really check my privilege and shut the fuck up, you know, because like if they can do the same thing that I'm managing, but while, you know, building a family, then I got no excuse.
Grateful.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's also in a half serious but half, you know, humorous way.
That's dope. I think a lot of people would compare themselves to somebody that's doing, you know, better than them, you know, like, but like, I think it's important to compare ourselves. If you're going to compare to, you know, you got to do both ways. You got to compare yourself to someone. Okay, I feel bad about myself because someone has more than me. Okay, but I feel great because I have so much more than most of the world.
And I guess that reminds me, talking about comparison, like, I also think about when my parents were my age, what were they going through? It's like, they were like, still like figuring out, like, I just came out, or like they just landed in America, or, you know, shit like that. I'm like, cool, that's probably a lot more stressful than this, so I'm gonna keep my head down and keep going, right? So that's another thing that I think a lot about. And also, at least for like industry specific stuff, like I do refer to and listen to a lot of, like, I guess the business podcasts or like case studies. Like I listen to a lot of How I Built This. And it seems like every like alcohol company, they're like, yeah, we almost didn't make payroll all the time for like 5 years, you know, So I think it's just like, okay, cool, maybe that's just how this is supposed to be. Right. It's just a fucking grind. I'm like, cool, okay, then if like, I always say, like, if I'm the only one struggling and everybody else is thriving, clearly I'm not cut out for this, or I'm doing something wrong, right? But it's like, okay, cool. If even successful people and like everybody else is like also just like grinding it out, and it's just like tough or what have you, then okay, cool. Then I'm no better or worse. Then at least, okay, cool, let's keep going.
So you know, one day when Lunar is $1 billion business.
I appreciate you saying when, not if.
And and looking back, right? Like, it's $1 billion, you know, you're like, you know, I'm ready for my next venture. I'm gonna sell this to, you know, the people that own Ciroc or whatever, you know. And looking back at that point, do you imagine that acquisition was the sweet spot, or do you imagine that whole way getting there was the sweet spot?
What do you mean by sweet spot?
Like
the thing that I'll savor?
The thing that's ultimately worth more. The acquisition or the journey that, you know, the along the way, you know?
Oh, that's tough.
Like, if you could pass only one of those things to your kids, which would you pass?
I mean, I want to say the journey.
Yeah.
Because that's like the cool thing to say. But I think the reality is like $1 billion is a
Hey,
lot to give
you're right. You're right.
You know what I mean?
For sure.
I mean, we all capitalistic dogs out here. So I'd be lying if I said like, because I mean, I
but
think
without any sort of like, if the kid just gave the kid $1 billion without any sort of
to pass on to my kids,
right? You know what I mean? Like,
I see.
Like this ability to do what you did, or just hand them $1 billion.
I see.
Yeah.
I think I have actually been thinking a decent amount about this because, like, you know, I talk good friends with like other like mentor entrepreneurs and founders and whatnot who like now have kids and how they're thinking about this a lot as well too.
Mm-hmm.
I do want them, like, I don't want them to take it for granted, right? In this incredible scenario where we have generational wealth, I don't want them to take it for granted. I do want them, like, I want them to work summer high school jobs, right? I want them to know how fucking painful it is on your wrist by the end of the summer, scooping all that ice cream at an ice cream parlor if they're still around, right? Sure. Things like that. I think maybe it's going back to what you're talking about, challenges, adversity, and whatnot. I think it is important.
Right.
I think also one thing that I think one of my old bosses does because he has like a big family and he was a parent at a young age. He's a white guy too, so I don't know how much of that plays in, but very much inspired by, like, he's like, yeah, I treat my kids like I tell them, like, until you're 18, my house, my rules. Straight up, right? It's like, cool, like, you don't want to go to school, too bad, you got to go. You're living in my house, like, my house, my rules.
Sure, he's not Asian.
Right.
Sounds very Asian to me.
No, but like, but when you think about it, it feels like he's almost treating them like adults, right?
Right.
Like an individual. Whereas, like, I feel like us Western is like, I don't give a shit if you're, whatever. Like, you're gonna do what I say because we're family, and that's how the family dynamic is. Right. But this is very much like adult to adult, individual, right? Right. It's like after 18, like
accountability almost.
Right. And it's like, if you want to go to college, cool. Like, if you go to a college that I have a preference for, or like a major or whatever, I'll help pay for it. If not, you figure out how to do it. Right. So I thought that was very interesting. Something that I hadn't really thought about. And it also aligns a lot with, it's going to sound less credible and not as cool when I say this in English, but there's like I guess she's a celebrity psychologist. Okay. Not some Dr. Phil shit, like legitimate, like she's like the real deal. Dr. O. Okay. Oh Eun-young. Dr. O for any listeners who know. She said this one thing that really struck a chord in me, which is like the healthy way to like treat and look at and manage your kids is like the most precious guest you'll ever have in your life. Right, which is like implicit in that is like they're a guest, which at some point they'll leave as like adults and individuals. So I feel like there's like a common thread in there somewhere.
I like that. I've never heard of that, but that's good.
So the way I try to think about it is like, cool, my house, while I'm paying for your bills and you're in my house, like, cool, you're gonna work your summer jobs, you're gonna do this, you're gonna do that. Right. But I think at 18, I think that's how I would want to raise them, but to be able to say like, but like, I mean, I'm always going to be your dad. You're always going to be family. Like, if you need a place, if you need a place to come back to, a nest, like, we're always going to be here. Right. As opposed to like giving them like $1 billion and just being like, go crazy with it, right? Because I don't think they'd know what to do with it.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And I think you letting them know, like, hey, look, like, this is safe for you. This is home for you. Yeah. They're going to be able to take that leap whenever they need to.
But talk to me again in 10 years when I'm actually a parent and see how gracefully I managed through that situation.
I think one thing you said earlier, I mean, I think as long as we're aware, which is that we're all going to be bad parents one way or another.
Yeah. Especially for the first, right? Yeah. I mean, I say this because I'm a first, because like, and I have friends who are now starting to have kids as well too. And they also, because I have a couple that also have like on their second and third as well too, and they're like, yeah, the first is the hardest because like you literally have no idea, right? No, never done this before, right? And it's like you can only listen, watch, so much.
Of course, yeah.
So, yeah, we're human, right?
Yeah. A little. I think to the answer was to pass on the kids, not the $1 billion.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. All for me.
Yeah.
They ain't getting a cent of that.
Yeah. You know, if you could say something to the Sean at 13 years old, 12, 13 years old, you know, what would you tell him? Like not some stuff like, oh, work harder or be more respectful. Some bigger truth that you know now, you know. And then what would that kid, looking at how much and what you've been able to do today, how he see you and what would he say about you, you know?
Let me think about what I would say to him.
Yeah, take your time on
But I
this.
think what he would say to current day Sean is like, motherfucker, you're actually doing it. He's like,
hell yeah.
I think that's what he'd say. It's like, okay, cool. You haven't made it yet, but at least you're like on your path to like at least giving it a shot. It's like you're walking the walk.
Yeah.
Right. You talk the talk. You're actually walking the walk.
Yeah.
So I think that's what he would say. What would I tell him? I would tell him that it's never going to be easy, so start sooner. Right? Get a couple more reps in. Right? It's like, sorry, I just keep using the sports references, but it's
I love it.
You don't have to jump into the major leagues. You can work your way up the minors, right? Get your reps in.
Yeah. That foundation.
Yeah, because like I mean, there's nothing like, especially in the entrepreneur space, like you hear every now and then, especially like on the venture capital like investors and stuff, they're like, you know, we like to see like, or it's not that we don't like to see. There's a lot of talks about like, oh, first time founders. It's like you know, you're like bumping your way into figuring things out and this and that, which obviously they're like, we love that, respect that, but there's a lot of like, I guess I don't know, like a respect of like, cool, like, oh, you're a second time founder, you know what to expect. I guess not too different from being a parent, right?
Right.
Because the first time you're like figuring away things out, but the second time you're like, you know what to expect, you know what to hedge against and whatnot, anticipate. So you know, I think just the experience, right? If you've done it before, you know what the process is like. You know it's supposed to suck. You know, and also I think it gives you the confidence knowing that you've done it before.
Yeah.
Right. I'm a big fan of Dr. K. He's on, I think, YouTube and Twitch and everything. He's a Harvard-trained psychologist. Okay. But he's like Indian American, and he has this like and he trained as like a Buddhist monk for many years. So I appreciate his perspective because it is very much like me, a very blend of East and West in that sense. And I think one of the things he said is like, confidence is not knowing that you can do it. Confidence is knowing that you can bounce back from it if you can't. Right?
Yes. I love that.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, like if you ask a girl out, she might say no. But if you know you're going to be okay, like that's confidence.
Right.
Right?
Right. I think that's such a subtle difference, but that's so true. Yeah. I think that's very true.
Now it's easier said than done, right?
Because the other way is like without trying, thinking that you could do it. That's arrogance.
Right. It could be, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But it's like also like if you can't,
right.
What are you going to do?
Yeah.
Are you going to be okay with it?
Yeah.
Or are you going to throw a fit and be like, no, like I was supposed to be the one, you know, like.
Right.
So easier said than done, but something, words I try to live by.
Right. Just a couple more small questions here. Yeah. You know, like I said earlier, if I have a silly goal, it would be a Grammy. You know, what would be like a silly goal for you and Lunar?
A silly goal?
Yeah. I guess $1 billion. Is that silly? No. That's realistic.
I mean that's silly.
Realistic.
That's silly, but like that's so like that's like just so like self-indulgent. Yeah. Right? It's like just for me.
Yeah.
I want something a little bit more extravagant.
Okay, hell yeah. Sure.
I think a Super Bowl ad.
Very
relevant for our category, right?
This is a great answer. Yeah.
Partially because like I have a design background and kind of like my training was in the agency style or model. Yeah. You know, one of the many different influences of why I started Lunar was like, you know, I do love the notion of like telling like cool creative like stories and ads and stuff like that. Yeah. But it's like, why are we telling just like a very homogenous ad? A homogenous story, right? In this diverse melting pot of the world. But then you need a client to tell these stories and have an ad for. It's like, oh man, we don't really have a brand that is befitting of telling the Asian American story, right? So
Right.
that was another angle of like, fuck, man, do we need to start with the brand first, right? So like, I would love to, you know, have the big, you know, budget and brand and opportunities to do, you know, a Super Bowl ad and things like that, right? It would, I would hope that it would have a similar effect of what, like, you know, like the OGs like Wong Fu Production
Right.
had for us, but on the big stage. Shout out to Wong Fu and the team over there. You know, because I don't know about you, but at least when I remember, I was like, wait, yeah, like this is relatable, and I get it, and it's like people, you know, portrayed by people that look like me and whatnot. Like, I would love to do stuff like that, but for like obviously like media ad stuff, on the big stage, right? And hopefully by then we have more, you know, we have Bohan Phoenix won a Grammy.
Woo,
and
let's go.
He's a feature, and we're doing like,
Let's go.
you know,
Yeah.
like if Nelly and
I'll be drinking this.
Yeah.
On the, you know, while I bust down,
Right.
you know, the performance. So.
I mean, maybe we got more like, you know, big time professional athletes in the big sports and whatnot. Like, let's have some fun, right? That would be my silly goal, probably.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I think it's good to have a silly goal. You know, I guess the last question here is, you know, well, I want to say thank you for the support.
Oh, thank you for having me
over the years,
Yeah.
and I see y'all at so many other Asian American initiatives, supporting Asian American initiatives. The question is, how can we support y'all?
Oh,
Yeah.
I guess this is the part where I do the plug.
Yes. Please.
But realistically, I think really drink a Lunar, right? Share it. Actually, that's actually one of the most common ways when I meet people, especially when I'm doing demos. They're like, "Oh, I've heard of Lunar. Like, I love Lunar," and it's like, you know, random people, and be like, "Hey, how did you hear about it?" They're like, "Oh, you know, one of my friends brought it to my, you know, rooftop party or my dinner party, right?"
I love that.
So get your friends hooked on Lunar, right? That would be the biggest help. Root for us, you know, help us out. And also, like, it doesn't have to be just Lunar, right? That's also, I get a lot of questions about that. It's like, oh, you know, there's Lunar, there's like, you know, there are a bunch of other Asian beverages and whatnot. Like, what's your take, or how do you feel about that? No, the bigger the merrier, right?
Hell yeah.
And it's actually very relevant to some of the things that we talked about. You know, if there's one Asian hip hop artist, then cool, you're like exotified.
Right.
But if there's like a whole boat and a big movement, now it's a movement.
Now it's a movement.
Now it's a movement, right?
Yeah.
And I guess in our world, we call it like building the category. Like, because Athletic
like
Brewing,
that.
for example, crushed it.
Yeah.
Now there's like a dedicated non-alcoholic beer section in every menu in every like grocery store like shelf, right?
Right.
Before it was just like in the corner like gathering dust.
Right.
But now it's like a popular, you know, section,
It's
right?
a very big section.
And now
yeah.
there are other like brands coming up with like cool new different non-alcoholic beers as well too. So, you know, I always say like the more Asian stuff is like popular, and especially Asian beverages, the more the rest of the world will be like, oh, there's a growing wave or movement of Asian flavors in beverage, right?
Yeah.
It only helps everybody else, right?
That's beautiful.
I mean, this is like $400 billion industry, man. We don't need to be infighting.
Yeah.
You know, we don't need to fight over who's the big fish in the
just
tiny
1 billion
pond.
is good.
Right.
1 billion is good enough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like just even like less than 1% of the market share,
Yeah.
like, and we'd
Yeah.
be crushing it, right?
Hell yeah.
So I think it's about like, let's keep the big picture in mind, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot more. It's a big world out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a great thing to end on. I think some of us, I've fallen victim to this, which is, you know, sometimes we operate and thinking, oh, if someone else takes the attention, we might not get it.
I
know?
do too. I mean,
Right.
I'm guilty of this. I think it's just
Right.
human nature in a lot
Yeah,
of senses,
yeah,
especially immigrants. I think there's a lot of like scarcity mindset that's
Yeah.
like subconsciously baked in. So,
Right.
so I say this like very gracefully here, but it's
Yeah.
also something that I work on all the time as well.
No, but I think the fact that when you say it, it's almost like a reminder to
Yeah,
self,
yeah.
right? Like, so that's something that's beautiful to end on. Support each other, because ultimately we're supporting ourselves.
Yeah. I guess I should add, like,
Yes,
to do
please.
so, you should go find us at Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, and Target in
Whole
New York
Foods,
City.
Trader Joe's, Target,
Yeah.
New York City. Tag them on IG. They usually will repost you, probably. You know, a lot of times they show love to the people that show love. So,
Yeah.
Lunar, thank you, Sean Rowe. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you, Bohan.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Rick. We good.
Yeah.